Greetings, everyone. Hi, I'm Rashid. I'm the host of the Red Pill Diaries. I'd like to first, before we go live, thank each and every one of you for giving us another hour of your time and another day out of your busy lives. Thank you so much. It's very much appreciated. I also would like to ask you to subscribe, to like, and share the video. Before we go live, which will be going in just a few seconds, to my left or my right over here, which is your left, check out all of our social media platforms. Please remember to subscribe to those and go show your support. We hope to give you a powerful show. We thank you again for giving us the opportunity to come to you and give you unfiltered, unadulterated truth. Okay? Because we know in a time where lies prevail, truth is a rare convenient. And truth is a rare commodity that we must use to get to the masses so that we can empower them with wealth, mental, spiritual, and emotional wealth. As the world that we know dies out, and as the governments that we know who rule the world try to enslave us mentally, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, and economically. On that note, thank you again. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And also on all of our social media platforms here, go and do the same thing. We really appreciate it. Now, onto the fire. We're about to go. Of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, Rashid, and we have Carl Zha here with us. How's it going today?
Hey, how are you, Rashi? Good to
I'm
see you
trying to
again.
do better. I'm hoping everything works. We've been working on this thing endlessly all day long, and we think we finally have it worked out, but we still encounter a few problems. Um, and we'll go into the show in just a minute, but we know that it wasn't our software. And we know, as you and I talked right after the show ended yesterday, we had no problems whatsoever, no microphone problems, no anything. So we'll expect some of that today, Carl. But onward into the show, I wanted to ask you about the arrogance of Macron, the French President Macron, as the people of Niger. They demanded the French not only pull out the military, but they demanded that the French ambassador be withdrawn, and Macron dismissed the people of Niger and the military of Niger and said that because we don't recognize them, we will not leave. What do you have to say on that matter?
Well, so if they don't recognize the government? What is your ambassador doing? He's literally holding up in his compound and refused to evacuate the premises. First of all, okay, there's report that I don't know if it's confirmed, but there's report that the Niger people in Niger have cut off power and water to the embassy. Good for them. Good for them. Because this is how you treat unwanted house guests, and that's your role is as an ambassador. You are there to put your nation in the best light, and and if the best thing they could do is refuse to leave, it doesn't look good for France, and it's not. I mean, right now they are doing this for their own domestic audience inside France to show, okay, we're tough, we're not giving in, right? But they're actually not serving French national interest nor doing anything for the French image abroad. People in Africa see that as colonial arrogance, which it is, and it's very childish. And there's even report of there's a report from the Cradle. They say the France was trying to persuade India, to pressure India to reject application of Algeria into the BRICS membership, because France don't want its former colonies to be part of the BRICS. And Macron himself said, BRICS is hostile toward Western interests. This is why people in Niger are flying the flags of BRICS member nations. They're flying the BRICS of China, of Russia, and they're even India and North Korea. They're even flying the flag of North Korea, because this is a very clear signal they're sending to these Western powers, especially France. We don't want you there. We prefer the BRICS. Go ahead. You want to say something, Rashid?
Because I wanted your take on it, because there was an open statement by some Western policymakers, specifically from France, the United States, and Great Britain, saying that they refuse to give up what they deem as theirs, their colonies, to China and Russia's influence and China's and Russia's inroads into Africa, even though the African nations want China and Russia in there, but with the racist, arrogant mind frame of them, they don't even see the racism in what they're saying, as if those nations, those people belong to them.
Exactly. There's a little bit static. Do you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like they're talking as if the Africans on the ground don't matter. If the Africans themselves have no agency, they're talking still like Africa is their own possession. I mean, I'm sorry, it's not 19. This is not 1923. This is 2023. 100 years later, you don't make the shots anymore. And you're not the only ones that the Africans have to turn for for credit, for finance. Right, there's the BRICS nations are opening up their own banks, and they're developing BRICS currency. This is why the Africans want them out, because it's kind of overbearing colonial arrogance they have to deal with. And but these people, they're so cut off from reality, sitting in Paris and Washington. They are they are so oblivious and completely lacking in self-awareness, how they're being perceived in the global South. That's why they talk like this. They talk like they're still talking in their little old boys club, and but right now we're a global connected world. On the internet, the news travel fast. We all know what they're up to. And so I think that the sham can only go on for so long. This is why people in Nigeria want them out. They have to deal with them for centuries.
While we're talking on this, I want your comments, because this was this just like went under the radar. We had the BRICS meeting in South Africa. We have the ousting of France from Mali, from Burkina Faso, and we have now the ousting of France from Niger. And while this is going on, nobody mentioned that there's an China-Africa security forum. And why has that gone unnoticed, unspoken about, especially in the midst of the Niger problem, when the West has openly stated that they see China and Russia's inroads into Africa as a security threat for them?
Well, there are a lot of people, the pundits, they're already dismissive of BRICS. They're saying, "Oh, BRICS is a loser club." BRICS. We have people saying stuff like BRICS is not the country, is not among the countries where the wealthy elite will send their children to get educated. It's like that's not the point. Well, maybe they don't want your wealthy child, spoiled kids to come there to get educated, and you know, of course they China and Africa summit. There's no white faces, right? Why should they even bother to cover this? But this is why they don't understand. This is why they're not wanted in Africa, because this is the kind of arrogance that people have to put up with for so long. Now they don't have to put up with anymore. You know, there's a whole reason for the BRICS to come together. You know, like one of the thing I have heard about talking about is the revival of the spirits of Bandung. They're talking about the Bandung Conference in 1955, the first Afro-Asiatic conference that was held in Bandung, Indonesia, by the non-aligned nations. At that time, all these nations coming out of colonialism, all these decolonized nations from Asia and Africa came together and say, we don't want Cold War. You know, we don't want to have to pick and choose who to trade with. We just want to develop our own country. We want to provide prosperity for our own citizens. And now, many years later, this is happening. You know, the BRICS is finally pulling it together. And under BRICS, you have all the world's major oil producers, all the world's major food producers. You know, Henry Kissinger once says, um, you know, let me pull up the exact quote so I'm not making up what Henry Kissinger has said. Uh, but he famously said, "Control oil and you control nations.
Yes.
Control food and you control the people." Well, guess what? Food and oil are not, you know, it's not the monopoly of the Western nations anymore. You know, you know, you have BRICS, the new members of BRICS. You got Iran and Saudi Arabia. You know, have been enemies for decades, and yet, you know, now they're sitting down together talking about peace and cooperation. And now you have the major oil producers. You have Russia, you have Iran, you have Saudi Arabia, you have UAE, and all of them are now in BRICS. It's like, what do we need France for? What's France bringing to the table, right? You know, like, so right now, the people in Africa are asking the same thing. We don't. Why do we need you? In fact, we don't want you.
You know, don't forget about Ethiopia. As Ethiopia, the Chinese did a study and they found a large amount of untapped oil. And this, after the Chinese did the study and they found it, all of a sudden there was a uprising with the Tigray region and all of that stuff like that. So we can't forget that all of these uprisings are instigated or fomented by the West to try to prevent um, Africa's independence, China's rise, and Russia's reemergence on the global scene as a global player, and also to suppress Iran. Because, as Dick Cheney famously said, anyone can go to Baghdad, but real men go to Tehran. You know, meaning that they wanted to actually take out Tehran because it was in China's and Russia's underbelly. You know, but I want you to listen to this clip. I'm not going to play the fullness of the clip. I'm going to play some of it, but this guy, he's projecting this, and this is a powerful congressman, and it happened around the time where the U.S. sent Congress people to Chinese Taipei against the wishes of the mainland's government. And I want you to see how, as he's speaking, it's okay for America to be dominant. It's okay for the dollar to be the world's reserve currency. It's okay for America to have unbridled, unchallenged influence. But God forbid, if China rises up and challenges this, they're being aggressive, they're being arrogant, and they want their ultimate goal is to supersede the United States and to overtake the United States. I just want you to listen to that and give me your feedback on the other side of this congressman and his talk. So here we are, right here.
Welcome back. More warnings this morning coming out about doing business with China as Xi Jinping moves to make China the #1 economic superpower and overtake the United States. I spoke with Texas Congressman Michael McCall, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. We spoke here at the Milken Institute. I want to ask you about China because now the Chinese Communist Party has been able to get the Saudis to transact in the Chinese yuan. Are you worried about the dollar losing its reserve status?
Well, not so much that. What I don't like, all of a sudden they're the peace broker. You know, they show up at the 11th hour. We're not there, right? When we don't lead, China fills a void. So they negotiate this peace settlement between the Saudis and Iran. And all it really means is they can have embassies in their respective countries. But they're doing it. Remember, Macron went to visit Chairman Xi in Beijing when I was in Taipei. What I do worry about the dollar is in the Belt and Road Initiative, that's their debt trap. You have to sign a contract saying, I'm going to sign up for the digital yuan. What China wants long term is for the digital yuan to be the global currency and not the U.S. dollar.
That's incredible. Tell me about that as it relates to surveillance, because I know that right now Ron DeSantis in Florida is pushing back on a digital dollar from the central bank because he feels that there's surveillance threats.
Well, I mean, some would argue we have to get, we got to compete with the digital dollar versus the digital yuan that China's on. China's in 140 different countries, Belt and Road. Each of those countries have signed up for the digital yuan. You do the math. Eventually, their goal is that the dollar is going to be the second-rate currency, and it will be the digital yuan. So we got to be this is a great power competition we're in.
This is an incredible story right here, and really an incredible development, in my view.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
I agree, and it's not talked about very often, but they want to dominate everything. It's not just military, it's economic. And they want to have the global currency, that being the digital yuan, and they're well on their way to doing that now.
And they.
Peg, how is it that it's okay for America to be unchallenged? It's okay for America to have the global reserve currency. It's okay for America to be the dominant power economically, politically, technologically, and culturally. But it's incredible to even think about China aspiring to do that. And if you looked at the whole, she said it twice, I counted. Wow, that's incredible. Like, she couldn't fathom the idea of some nation, specifically a non-white, non-Western nation, rising up to the level as a peer or even supersede the peer competitiveness of America in the West. What say you on these matters?
It blows their mind. It's because they're so used to the U.S. hegemony over the world that for them that's the norm. That should be normal. It's not normal when the U.S. suddenly lose grip on the world, and also the representative, the congressman, he's just a typical U.S. politician. It shows how little he actually knows about the world affairs. He's like, oh, China is this peace rucker. What the hell is a peace rucker? This peace rucker is bringing peace between Saudi and Iran so they can have their embassy in their capital. No, dumb. China had embassy in both countries for a long time. This is how China are able to bring the two to the table. And the real reason is because U.S. has been involved in the Middle East as a destabilizer. We all know U.S. have been supporting Saudis against Iran. Before that, they were supporting Iraq against Iran in the Iraq-Iran war, and then follow up with the U.S. own invasion of Iraq. So U.S. has always been the destabilizer of peace in Middle East. This is why peace in Middle East is unacceptable for them. And what China is doing is finally, bringing an end to one of the worst humanitarian crises of this century, which is Yemen, the real humanitarian crisis in Yemen, not the fake genocide that supposedly happened in Xinjiang in China. And now that there's possibly a peace, it seems U.S. will be less relevant. I mean, the Saudis that had depended, Saudi and all the Gulf Arab countries, they depended on U.S. for security guarantee because they're a monarchy and sometimes they're not exactly popular with their people. So they needed the Washington's military muscles to be in the area to reassure them to secure their own power. But now Russia just showed that it can project military power into Middle East, like what Russia did in the Syrian war. Russia is, while U.S. was waging a proxy war, funneling all these jihadists to fight Assad, Russia is the one that actually put its foot down and sent its air force into Syria to bomb the hell out of those terrorists. And so now the Saudi and the Gulf countries see, hey, okay, so we're no longer really economically dependent on the United States, because before there's the petrodollar, right? In the 1970s, Washington worked out a deal with the Saudis that they will price the oil in dollars. So that means that forced everybody to use dollar as world currency, because if you want to buy oil, you need dollars. It's just simple as that. That assured dollar status as a world reserve currency. But guess what? Right now, the Saudis' largest export market is China. Right. And why do China and they right now there's no need for China to pay in the Saudi oil in US dollar, because China is a manufacturing center of the world. If the Saudi wants to buy goods from China and China wants oil, they can just do business in their own currencies. Saudi can take yuan as payment for oil and then take that yuan to buy Chinese manufactured goods. There's no participation of United States in any of this. I mean, maybe they still could buy luxury goods, but like, I don't know what luxury goods U.S. produce anymore. I mean, like, they can buy that from Europe. The luxury cars. So this is why U.S. is suddenly finding itself being left out of the loop. And just by the talk of these between the anchor and the congressman, they're not quite there. They're. I mean, let's face it. Most of the U.S. politicians are not very educated. they're not very world savvy. They're really smart when it comes down to the grift, how to squeeze out every last cent of the tax dollars and line in their own pocket. They're great at that. But outside of that, that's not their area of expertise. and so. I think there's no. I mean, I just don't see how it's like It's like the cliche. American play checkers. The Chinese play Go, right? So it's really game here.
But don't you think that it's sheer international gangsterism to try to force your monetary system down the throat of somebody else? So like you just said, China produces almost for the whole world. It's the factory for the whole world. Africa is the factory for China. China is the factory for the whole world. So now, if you cut the middleman out, which is the United States and the dollar, she doesn't get a percentage of the international transactions, and at the same time, she cannot manipulate the currency rates to cause inflation or cause a spike in food or a drop in this, which ultimately cause uprisings in other countries or the overthrow of government. So don't you think this has a lot of international gangsterism to it?
Oh, I'm totally. I mean, U.S. has for decades, since 1970s, because the U.S. dollar has the status of world reserve currency, they can just print however they want. They know the world will take it. They can export inflation to the rest of the world, and this is why U.S. can enjoy the living standard it has. Even though it has been hollowing out its own manufacturing base in United States. And instead it breeds these financial elite who don't really produce anything at the end of the day. And this is, but this would have gone on a lot longer if the U.S. had been smart about it and not throwing sanction around all over. So they're sanctioning on Russia after Ukraine war. That's really the trigger for the latest progression of de-dollarization. And suddenly, Russia find itself locked out of the international financial system. It got taken off the SWIFT, and they look at it. Okay, well, we have a lot of resources. We have a lot of oil, a lot of food that people worlds want. We have China to our south that needs these goods. We can just transact using Chinese currency, and then we got around this whole dollar issue. And with Iran's admission into BRICS, you have another member who have a very strong incentive to push for de-dollarization, because Iran has been sanctioned even longer than Russia has been. And again, Iran is a major oil producer, oil and gas. So Iran just ironed out a deal with China, where China is going to come in and build them a brand new modern airport, and you will be paid with Iranian crude oil. The U.S. dollar not needed, and like without the sanction, they might have just go ahead and pay with the dollar, because that's the easiest way forward. But now U.S. had intentionally put in obstacles for those nations to participate in the dollar market. So now all of the BRICS are calling for de-dollarization, from Brazil to South Africa. So we're gonna see this ball rolling, and it's good. This is why a lot of people are producing copium in the U.S. press right now, because they understand this is a big deal. They understand they understand BRICS is a big deal, but now they're saying, they're trying to put a brave face and say, "Oh, the BRICS club is for losers. They're irrelevant." If they're irrelevant, you wouldn't be even talking about them. And go ahead.
I'm sorry. It was something that you said triggered something in me. Now, when we go back to the sanctions on Russia, it was America's plan to keep China and Russia apart. In the leadership of Russia, I believe that some of them still wanted to believe that they were going to eventually integrate into the Western system. But when the United States doubled down and put the gas on trying to break Russia, I think they came to a unwanted realization that Russia's future is with Eurasia, because the majority of Russia is in Asia, not in Europe, but is in Asia. And when you look at the things, the policies think about this, unintended consequences. These sanctions cause the world to see the hidden hand behind all of these arrogant policies. And then you push Russia into the arms of China. And then Russia connects the Mir system with the Union Pay system. Eurasia is about to connect. The Eurasian Economic Union is about to connect to the Union Pay system. The Iranian system, independent pay system, is now operable with the Union Pay system, and the West Asian Economic Union is thinking about connecting to the Union Pay system. I might add, for those of you who don't know, that the Union Pay system is a Chinese payment system, and you have Latin American and African nations now connecting to the Union Pay system. So these arrogant policies have now pushed the world towards China and integrating economically and politically with the Chinese instead of with America and Europe. And what do you think was in their mind, and what do you think is still in their mind to continue to double and triple down on failed policies?
Well, it's American hubris, right? I mean, it's American exceptionalism. This kind of thinking led them to think they can win against Russia. They're still pushing for war against Russia, until victory. Like, what does that mean? What does victory against Russia even look like? They think there will be like Napoleon marching onto Moscow. I mean, this is delusional. I mean, I think finally some reality finally seeping in. If you notice, there's a big change in the atmosphere in the press lately about the Ukraine war. And now more and more people are coming to realize, okay, Russia is not going to be defeated. Ukraine war actually is not going well for the West. But that has not translated into any concrete policy action yet. There's nobody in the West and finally say, okay, maybe we do need China to come in as a peace broker to broker a peace deal and stop freeze the conflict. Because the hubris, the arrogance is deep, very, very deep, man. Because they have to accept that for them to accept that U.S. is just another country among the community of nations. It's a hard pill to swallow. It's for USA #1. That has been ingrained into everyone from a young age. They can't outgrow it, unfortunately.
Well, what do you see? They're going after the Brazil. They believe that in the BRICS, Brazil and South Africa, they look at them as two weak links. Maybe if we don't offer South Africa this money from the IMF, then maybe we can make them capitulate and throw a monkey wrench into China and the BRICS plan. And now they're openly talking about trying to balkanize Brazil. I'm serious. This is something that is talked about openly now, of trying to balkanize Brazil because Brazil refuses to back the West and is making its way with China and the BRICS. There's an old saying: when you're in the ditch, stop digging. Why won't they stop digging? They're in the ditch. They're alienating people. And like the congressman said, he let the cat out of the bag when he said this. He said, China is in 140 countries with the Belt and Road Initiative. They see that as the end all be all, because with that, it's an alternative to the Western dominated SWIFT system. With that, there's an alternative for lending and borrowing, and not with these parasitic terms that the West put on these nations, these crippling terms and agreements that if I loan you this, first of all, they put them in poverty. Then they say that we'll give you a loan to do this, and when you get the loan, they dictate that you can't use the loan to get the people out of poverty. You must use it to invest back into the Western economies. I mean, what do these people see? What's going on, or are they in bizarro world?
They're definitely in the bizarro world. They live in their own bubble, right? Like all they get, their feedback they're getting is from their own think tanks that they have themselves have funded. It's like they produce so much propaganda they start to believe in it. That's always the worst mistake. Never believe in your own propaganda. They're losing a sense of reality, and when confronted with reality, they got hostile. I think Xi Jinping, his concluding remark at the BRICS summit, he said it very well. He said we need to promote development and prosperity for all. Many emerging markets and developing countries have come to what they are today after shaking off the yoke of colonialism. With perseverance, hard work, and huge sacrifice, we succeeded in gaining independence and have been exploring development paths suited to our national conditions. Everything we do is to deliver better lives to our people. But some country, obsessed with maintaining its hegemony, has gone out of its way to cripple the developing countries and emerging markets. And whoever is developing fast became the target of containment. Whoever is catching up became its target of obstruction. But this is futile. And I have said more than once that blowing out one's lamp will not bring light to oneself. Very, very well said. And we all know what some countries Xi Jinping is referring to without naming names. But the problem is the U.S. elite at the point they refuse to accept the reality, so they're fighting it. They're still fighting tooth and nail to preserve their own hegemony, which is slipping out of their fingers.
Oh man, it is absolutely astonishing that grown men and women running, they're supposed to be over the most powerful government on the planet, seem like they can't add 1+1 to come up with 2. Every time they add something up, it's 45. 1+1 is 45 today. 1+1 is 35 today. They make it fit their narrow thinking, their narrow mind, and instead of preserving hegemony, they are now alienating the entire globe, and they see China as a threat, like Putin's shirt says in the comment section about he's making fun about what they say about China's debt trap, right? He's making fun because the West loves to use they're in Africa and they're doing this in Latin America, the debt trap, and this, and they don't sit back and look at the path that they blazed to become economic and political powers. They don't look, and they minimize the importance of the lives that were lost for them to become powers, but then they project on China and on Iran and on other nations. Like, as you were talking, I thought about something when you were talking about anybody that rises up to challenge the United States. And I thought about in the 80s how Japan was a manufacturing powerhouse, right? In Japan, the economy was on par to challenge the United States, but because the United States had control over certain levels of Japan, they stymied and then imploded the Japanese economy because they saw it as a threat. I believe the reason that they are lashing out at China too is because they don't have those same levers to stop China's rise or China's emergence as a global economic, political, and military power, and to see a non-white, non-Western nation on par with the West, that's blasphemous in the eyes of the think tanks and those people who are, I would say, indoctrinated with imperial hubris. What do you say about that?
I remember that. I came to United States in 1990. This was at the height of kind of the Japan scare in United States. They were like they were destroying the Toyotas with sledgehammers on TV, and then they have the movie Rising Sun. That's like those Japanese are coming here, buying up everything, taking our women, and it's but Japan, because it's not an independent nation, it's militarily occupied by United States since World War II. So you cannot say no to United States, even though the Tokyo governor wrote a book called Japan Can Say No, but no, actually they can't. They can't say no when U.S. have the boots on the ground. So in 1985, United States imposed what's called the Plaza Accord on Japan. That actually caused the deflate, the pop of the Japan bubble. That directly led to the crippling of the Japanese economy, led to the lost decades afterwards. So this is, but right now, U.S. is trying to do the same thing to China. This is why the U.S. sanction on high tech sectors, on the sales of advanced semiconductors to China. But China and Russia, they're like Lavrov said, China and Russia are true sovereign nations. Mm-hmm. We are not beholden to United States. And this is why U.S. find it very upsetting, because now there's two countries that can act according to their own national interests rather than to be a puppy dog of the United States. So they have to do whatever they can to undermine China and Russia. And in doing so, they're just pushing China and Russia closer and closer together. As you mentioned, Russia in the beginning, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they very much wanted to join the West. One of the reasons Soviet Union collapsed is because the Soviet elite back then, they wanted to join the Western elite. They want to be the ones that also like outright owning properties and go on vacation in Europe and own mega yachts, sail the world. And they got all of that. But what they didn't get is respect. Immediately after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the West have pushed the NATO forward. Even in 2000, Putin was saying, we can join NATO. Russia, we'd like to join NATO. 2000. This was 2000, and of course America laughed at them. So like, no, of course not. The whole reason for NATO's existence is to contain Russia. So now they have forced Russia to turn away from its Western orientation, because Russia has always had kind of this dual identity with its one foot in Europe, one foot in Asia. But since Peter the Great, Russia has been looking west, to be part of the West. And what United States and its allies, its vassal states in Europe is doing is that they slap Russia in the face and said no. And now what United States foreign policy has created is this nightmare that envisioned by Brzezinski, and is when Russia, China, Iran join together to form what he sees anti-American alliance. Except now it's more than Russia, China, and Iran. With the BRICS, you have countries in Latin America, you have Brazil, you have countries in Africa, South Africa. And now we have, you have oil producers, Saudi, Iran, you have Ethiopia, a big African country, and Egypt, the biggest Arab nation. And now if you look at the percentage of GDP at the power purchasing parity level, the BRICS is already larger than G7. And with these additional new members that come January 2024, it's going to be even bigger. And BRICS already produce the world's majority of it already contains the world's largest oil producers outside United States, and all the nations that produce food, energy, and manufacturing center. The BRICS doesn't need the West. Well, people in the West have this delusional thinking that they need us to consume. They need us to consume their goods. No, they don't. They can produce goods for themselves. I mean, there are plenty of people in the global South and need television, need laptops, need cell phones. Why do they need you sitting in Paris and Washington to consume for them? No, thank you.
I did a show 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago when I finally got on YouTube. It was called We're Number One, No More. And it was about a 45-50-minute show, and I replayed it this week. And it's about the economic paradigm and political shift that was underway. And a lot of people don't know that according to the metrics, China actually surpassed the United States in 2015 in purchasing power parity. A lot of people don't know that because the Chinese are humble and they allowed America to be drunk on whatever they want to be drunk on, and they kept their heads low and kept grinding towards where they are today. And so in that video that I did, there is an article that I referenced, and this article is referenced from October the 15th, 2020. And the name of the article it is from the National Interest, one of those magazines, the nationalinterest.org. And it was October 15th, 2020. And the title of it is called China is Now the World's Largest Economy. We shouldn't be shocked. Now, before I talked about that article, I referenced CBS and I think NBC actual newscast from 2015 talking about China had surpassed the United States. And so I flipped it forward to 2020 at the time. And I want you to listen to the first paragraph of this. And this is what has the U.S. panties in a crawl right now. Okay. It says China is now the largest economy. We shouldn't be shocked. China has now displaced the U.S. to become the largest economy in the world, measured by the more refined yardstick that both the IMF and the CIA, now judged to be the single best metric for comparing national economies. The IMF report shows that China's economy is 1/6 larger than America's at $24.2 trillion versus the United States $20.8 trillion. Why can't we admit reality? What does this mean? This is what they were talking about in the national interest in 2020. And in the article, as it goes on and it says, despite this unambiguous statement from the two most authoritative sources, most of the mainstream press, with the exception of The Economist, continue reporting the U.S. economy is number one. So what's going on? See, they were even perplexed because all the metrics that are used to measure the strength of an economy, the growth of an economy, the power of the economy, all had shifted. And I'm talking about far shifted in China's corner than in the U.S. corner. In that same year, that same month that this article came out, we were in the midst of the pandemic. And you can pull up the article, it's on RT, and they were talking about the United States economy was expected to lose 16 point some trillion dollars a year. So if your economy is a 20.2 billion and you lost 16 point some trillion, how can you rationalize that your economy is bigger than China's economy, which is 24.2 at the time trillion dollars? Make this make sense to me, Carl.
Okay, so now there are two ways of accounting for economy. One is power purchase parity, which is based on how much the money can buy you in that particular country. By that metric, China have surpassed United States a long time ago. And the other one is in the nominal dollar terms, which is priced in US dollars. But we all know that that game is rigged. I mean, like the dollar goes up 5%, against RMB, and then does that mean that somehow the Chinese economy shrunk by 5%? No, like people in China barely felt the impact unless they're paying for American goods. So this is this is why the real economists have always look at both. You have to look at nominal dollar terms and the PPP. Because the nominal dollar term GDP at one point it did reflect something. You reflected how much the world desire your goods versus because sometimes even though your money goes further in your own country, but because your export is not so desired, so the price lower in the dollar terms. But today, I mean, China is the factory of the world. They already make everything, and so all these kind of the dollar term, because we have the Fed that's manipulating the rates, that. But whatever they do, they're not making. Just by their decree at the Federal Reserve, it's not going to make the Chinese economy shrink, right? Because that's not happening. So this allowed people, Western elite, feel better about themselves. They can still look at the chart like, we're still ahead of China. There's nothing to worry about. I actually like the Peter Zeihan school of geopolitics. They keep on saying, oh, don't worry, China have all these headwinds. They have a demographic collapse. China is going to collapse on its own. We don't need to worry about them. I actually like that. I like it when they just keep their head in the sand and pretend nothing is going to happen, and then just let China quietly take over and raise ahead. But right now we have instead we have politicians who are trying to make hay. So they say, oh, China is threatening our way of life. It's how. It's because of Chinese manufacturing that United States can maintain the standard of living they have right now. Because otherwise, everything will be hell expensive. And we can see that from the recent sanctions on Russia. Everything, all the energy price went up. Everything went up. When they sanctioned China, suddenly all the Chinese manufactured computer goods, electronics also went up, and this is all the doing of the United States government. They don't care because for them the inflation doesn't hurt the billionaires too much. It's the average people who have to spend their hard-earned incomes to purchase necessary goods every day that's getting hurting. For the billionaire, it's just a number. They have plenty of money in the bank, but this is why they're so out of touch with the average Americans, the average reality of the country. And this is something has to change, man. Something has to change in the United States. either we change them, either they need to change, or I think the American people need to change them. need to throw them out of the office, because I just don't see this keep going. You can fool people, some of the time. You can't fool people all of them at all the time, man. I mean, like, this is getting really ridiculous. I'm actually coming to United States in a month, so I will bear witness to the shit show once again.
Everybody, please like, subscribe, and comment. Also, so as we're talking on this, and we know that China is the manufacturing base for the entire planet. The U.S. flags are made there. The U.S. pendants that go on their lapels are made there. The computer boards are made there. The microchips that go into these processors. We see the boots that the soldiers wear, the fatigues that the soldiers wear from the United States. I mean, now listen to me good, because I want a real in-depth answer on this. I want you to go in on it. How in the hell can the United States expect to win a war with a nation that produces the computer boards for your F-22s or your F-35s or your F-16s or your F-15s, your computer boards for your warships and your fatigues for your military? How and I might add, and I owe you $1.2 trillion. And there was a report, what was it, about a year ago, that says in 1 year, in 9 months, the Chinese shipbuilding outproduced the United States and NATO shipbuilding by 3 times in 1 year. How can you win a war against with all those odds stacked up against you, and yet you're still provoking that nation that has all these advantages to war? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's this is why they're pushing for so-called decoupling from the Chinese economy right now. They say, oh, we can't afford to have the global supply chain held hostage by the Chinese Communist Party, when they control everything. So we got to diversify. So United States is pushing a lot of the multinational companies to move their manufacturing out of China. So what has happened since the sanctions went in effect a few years ago is that United States.
Really? Did we lose him? I think he froze. I think Carl froze. Hopefully, everybody, you see what happened, because this was a doozy of a question to ask, and they froze him, or his connection was dropped. Hopefully, he'll come back in the booth, and we'll continue this discussion. But until we can get called back, let us continue to shake, rattle, and roll. Shouts out to Paulo Soares in Brazil. Shouts out to Net Rondo in Canada. Shouts out to Putin's shirt. Thank you all. And I think Carl is back in the booth. Oh, he is coming. He's going out and he's coming back in. I think his link was disrupted or cut. But again, this is what I'm telling you. This is what happens to me on my show all the time. I'm not the biggest show, because every time we get 30 or 40, they take about 20 or 30 or something like that subscribers. But I do know this small platform, this small show is your favorite show. All right? I'm going to say that again. This small platform, this small show is your favorite show's favorite show. All right? Now, again, we're going to keep rapping on this because think about this. If China produces everything from your underwear to your fatigues, everything from your silencers that go on your guns to the computer boards that go into all of these warplanes, warships, radars, all of this stuff. If they produce all of this, and plus, I owe them $1.2 trillion. How can I prosecute a successful military campaign against a person that I am financially indebted to and beholden to with all of the vital essentials that my nation needs and that my military needs? Carl is back in the thing, and we're going to bring him back up. And I'm going to finish this thought. I'm going to bring Carl right back up. But how can we prosecute a successful war against a nation that you are financially beholden to, and that you get all of your vital, tangible things that makes you a nation? Because remember, as I bring Carl in to finish his point, remember that if a war breaks out between China and the United States, most people don't put this in their head. America loves the sanctions, right? Europe loves to throw sanctions around. What if China sanctions the United States? 93 to 95% of all goods on the shelves of all stores in the United States come from China. Within a week or two, the economy would collapse. It would collapse. I'm going to bring Carl back in. I think we have a better connection. So there we go. Go ahead, Carl.
Hi. I think it's my internet conked out. I have to restart. I have to restart my modem. So I was saying this is why the U.S. elite are pushing for the so-called decoupling of the economies. They think, okay, we just need to, we just need bodies. We just need bodies to produce goods for us. We can just, we don't need China. We can move them to Vietnam, to India, to Indonesia, Cambodia, Mexico, whatever. So in the last couple of years, what we have seen is the U.S. import continue to go up. It's the proportion that's directly imported from China is going down, but at the same time, the U.S. import from Mexico, from Vietnam is going up. But then if you look at the trade number between China to Vietnam and Mexico, that's going up. China is exporting to Vietnam and Mexico, and then they just basically slap on the made in Vietnam, made in Mexico, re-export to the United States. And what U.S. consumer end up paying is higher prices. We're just end up paying a higher premium for this additional transit. And for somehow the U.S. elite is deluding themselves to think that this is all working out according to the plan. And this is just, I mean, it's mind-bogglingly dumb. And as you say, what's going to do if U.S. sanctioning on Chinese economy is sanctioning itself? They don't need to send a navy to blockade the Chinese coast. The Chinese just not shipping it. They can just not load the goods on the docks. Saving the Seventh Fleet a trip to South China Sea. And but realistically, if the hot war break out between U.S. and China, it will be end of the human civilization as we know it, and not just a big economic damage, because I just don't see U.S. will hold back from using nuclear weapons, because what happens once a U.S. aircraft carrier gets sunk? The temptation will be very high from on the U.S. to use what they call tactical nuclear weapons. In fact, they talk about this in various Pentagon papers. And once you go nukes, there's no coming back. There's no de-escalation from a nuclear war. It's just gonna go more and more until the whole civilization is gone. But at this point, the U.S. elite are so dumb. They don't. it almost looked like they don't believe in MAD anymore, the mutually assured destruction. They think they can. This is why they're also confronting Russia. Russia actually has the most nuclear weapons. They have more nuclear weapons than the United States. And I just saw a news. There was a recent drone attack on a Russian airport. This just happened in the last 24 hours. And the location is so far from Ukraine. Some people are suspecting they're launching the drone attack from across the border from Estonia. And Estonia is a NATO member. And if this was proven, I mean, we're that close to World War III territory here. But this is why our elite have to go, man. They have to go. They're not only hurting themselves, they're hurting us, the rest of us. And I every time I talk about U.S. politics, I always end up laughing because it's so ridiculous. People say, why do you laugh? It's so terrible. Like, what else am I gonna do? I mean, like, this is we live in the bizarro world, Rashid.
Yes, and I was thinking, like, say for instance, a war, God forbid, a war breaks out between China and the United States. China embargoes the United States. Immediately, within a week or two, all stores are out of goods. The shipping dries up. The banks need their money back from the shippers. So now you have defaults on multiple loans. There's mass layoffs, everything. Now the U.S. economy goes into a tailspin. So now how can you fund a war when no nation is buying your debt anymore? And now there's a rush out of your debt. So the insanity of the politicians to push this, and at the same time, you have war games, well, they say publicly 18 times, but we know if they say 18, it must have been about 180 times. They war gamed every possible scenario with a war with China. In each one, they lost and lost quicker. And the only time that they made it out without devastating losses, and they lost that one too, is when they employed weapons that they don't have and that are projected to get in the next 15 to 20 years. And yet, with all of this, with people knowing this, all of this known to the people, why would you antagonize the nation and then provoke the very nation that's funding your way of life?
It's profitable, Rashid. It's profitable for the military-industrial complex because they are, you know what they're doing? They're counting on the patience of the Chinese leadership to not respond to their provocation, so it can keep on they can keep on cranking on the tensions, so they will be higher, so they can continue to sell weapons to Taiwan, so they can continue to sell weapons to the rest of the world, and everybody's lining up their pockets, and they still I think they still have a plan to retire peacefully to Bahamas, because they think what they're doing is not going to blow the world up, because it's part of the hubris. They think, we can keep on walk across their red lines. They will not respond. This is what they thought about Russia. This is why they were doing all this crazy stuff in Ukraine leading up to the Euromaidan. They thought, okay, when we push the NATO border eastward, Russia didn't respond. What's one more country, right? We just add Ukraine. What's one more? That's just one too far. And this is, I mean, you heard that congressman on TV. Do you really think you know what's going on in the world, Rashid?
Here is something breaking from Putin's shirt. He says Ukrainian UAVs were down over Russia's Bryansk, Oral, Kaluga, and I'm butchering these, in Ryazan and Moscow regions. He said, thank God there are no casualties so far. Also, he says that there were more drone. This one was before more drone attack. Moscow has repelled all of them as we're speaking. And he made a point up here before this, and I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to address this real quick, which is a good point he made. He said, no wonder, and he's talking about Mexico, I believe, recently said he wasn't going to join BRICS and instead stay with the North American bloc. This is after he petitioned to join BRICS. And then Lindsey Graham threatened to invade Mexico. and wage war on Mexico. And under pressure, they sent in I think it was someone at the CIA or one of those alphabet intelligence agencies to threaten him personally. And that changed his public stance. It wasn't that he just came, he had his, what they say, come to Jesus moment. No. It was threatened of assassination or overthrow and the threat of the United States invading Mexico. Think about that, because on one hand, they say Ukraine is a sovereign nation able to make its sovereign choices so long as the choices are with the West. But Mexico is not a sovereign nation and can't make sovereign choices to go towards the global South. What say you on that matter, Carl?
Poor Mexico, so far from God, so close to the United States. I mean, like, this has been the fate of Mexico for centuries. This is the thing what U.S. don't, a lot of average Americans don't think about. If you look at when has U.S. actually won a war against a peer competitor by itself? Like, people would cite World War II. No, you don't understand. World War II, Soviet Union did most of the heavy lifting, fighting Nazi Germany. It's true that U.S. did a lot defeating Imperial Japan, but the industrial base of Imperial Japan and United States in 1940, there's just no comparison. So a lot of this is war game that U.S. planners are designed versus China. They think they can just replay Pacific War 2.0, right? But they don't realize the difference between the industrial base of Japan and United States in the 1940s is the difference between U.S. and China, except the role is reversed. United States in the position of the Imperial Japan in the 1930s and 1940s, and China is in the position of United States in the 1940s, because like that's the difference in the industrial capacity. Like you mentioned earlier about the production of the warship, China has 13 shipyards, United States has 7. And just one of these Chinese shipyards, the Jiangnan shipyard outside of Shanghai, is larger than all of 7 U.S. shipyards. And on average, in the past several years, China has been producing 3 warships for every warship U.S. produced. But in 2022, last year, China produced 7 warships to 1 U.S. warship produced. That's the kind of the industrial capacity difference between United States and China. And this is why, like, China is not in a rush. China's like, time is on our side. We'll just keep on making warship like dumplings. You cannot outproduce us. Like I saw like one of the military Twitter account is saying, oh, the U.S. is gonna authorize production of like thousands of drones, to do the, like, I'm like, dude, if U.S. can produce thousands of drones, the Chinese can produce millions in the meantime. And they can literally produce enough drones to block out the sun. Like, you cannot compete. And like right now at the current industrial level in United States, you need to realize you are at the level of Imperial Japan in 1940s. And if you're gonna be as foolish as the Imperial Japanese army in the 1940s, you will end up in the same spot. But people are, I think, what happened is in United States, the general populace overall is not very well educated. And now what we're seeing is that's filtered up to the elite. Now our elite is also not very well educated, because they're starting to believe all the propaganda themselves have been producing through all these think tanks and all these like corporate media, and now they really believe in their own like invincibility, which like people outside the United States can see a lot more clearly. That's why they're signing up for BRICS right now. And go back to U.S. records of fighting peer competitor. All these U.S. military victories or whatever, it's all against a much smaller opponent like Iraq, Afghanistan, Grenada. Grenada, the Reagan's great victory in the 1980s. I mean, so I think it's more realistic if a Republican came to the office of presidency, it's more realistic that U.S. will try to throw its weight around in Latin America. I mean, like they have been openly talking about invading Mexico for a while now. They talk about they're going down there to solve the drug problem. They're going to go punish Mexico for the cartels, and they openly talk about it. And see, like this is why. I mean, I understand Mexico is holding off on joining the BRICS because they don't want to give U.S. more excuse to launch a border invasion. Yeah.
You know, to me, as I'm looking at this, and I'm saying there are no adults in the room because no one is sitting down and dealing with reality. See, they're looking at things from a perspective of the position where America used to be the most dominant power. They're looking at it through a position of where America had unchallenged, unrivaled economic and political clout. And those days are long past because now you have multiple centers of power around the globe. And I believe some of these people, they're ready to burn the world down to keep somebody else from ascending to the top spot. And I have every validation of that due to their public stance on things, through their publications of papers, and also their military posture. And they're openly talking about, like you said, using quote unquote tactical nuclear weapons, and decades ago that was unspoken, because everybody knew that to use a nuclear weapon, regardless of tactical or strategic, that would lead to all out, no holds bar nuclear war. But because America finds herself in a predicament where she no longer can dominate the geopolitical landscape militarily, and that she's confined now because of the union pay and the mere system, she's constrained economically. I believe this is like a spoiled child lashing out now. I was able to. Now there's a new baby in the room. I was able before to get all the milk and all the food and all the attention. I can no longer get that, so now I'm lashing out, and I don't care if the baby over there is crying or anything. I'm just going to lash out till I get what I want. What say you on the matter?
It's a child that has never received a proper spanking.
I couldn't have said it better. I could not have said that better. Oh, yeah. So, where do you think this puts us? Because I'm going to be honest with you. When we talk about China being the global producer, manufacturer, and then we talk about America putting pressure on corporations to leave China. Well, nobody talks about that some companies followed the U.S. advice and went to India and then found that the grass wasn't greener over there and lost billions of dollars and closed down their plants that they had high hopes because India's population mirrors China's population. But they're not as skilled in these. We're getting some feedback from
yeah.
Okay, there we go. We're getting some feedback from StreamYard, but they why haven't that been talked about? That these corporations, some of them followed the U.S. dictates and moved to these countries, but then found that the grass was burned up over there when they thought it was greener.
Yeah, because the U.S. elite themselves are so far removed from the manufacturing process because they already move all the manufacturing outside United States. So for them, they think manufacturing is easy. They think that we just need to add more bodies. We just need some cheap labor to produce goods for us. But that's not how manufacturing works. Manufacturing is a process. It requires industrialization. What China did to get to where it is today versus 40 years ago is that China built its infrastructure. They educated their public. They had universal education. They raised their literacy rate. Then they built infrastructure. They built ports. They built roads. They built railroads. They built power plants. One of the problem when multinational firms and move their factory out of China to some of these other countries, they realize there's power shortage. You can't. Sometimes you need a whole ecosystem to manufacture. You need power. You need roads. You need ports. It's and not the Rome is not building a day. China was not building a day. You can't just expect to plug a factory from point A to point B and expect it to be plug and play. It doesn't work like that. And I mean, in fact, that China took decades to build out its infrastructure. At that time, a lot of these economists in the Western media say like, oh, China is overbuilding. It's overbuilding its power grids. It's overbuilding its roads. Its railroad investment. It's wasteful. Nobody's going to use it. But China is building from the mindset of that. If you build it, they will come, and they did. And it has a multiplier effect. When you build the roads, once regions get connected, people can move easily, goods can move easily. When you build the power grids, you can add more production. That's why, like, one of the things. This is why China was very strategic when they restricted the export of gallium and germanium to the West, because gallium it's actually not a rare earth. It came from it's basically a byproduct of producing aluminum. Now, the material they use to produce aluminum bauxite is actually plentiful in the earth crust. But to produce aluminum, you need lots and lots of electricity. So unless you have a lot of aluminum production already, you're not going to have a lot of this byproduct of gallium. So to just produce a gallium, you need to build up. First, you need to build up power plants, extra power capacity. Then you build the aluminum plant, and then you have to make it. If you produce because producing gallium by itself is not very economically profitable. So they have to produce aluminum. So you have to find the market for this aluminum. It's a very involved process. U.S. right now doesn't even have the extra capacity on its power grids. That's why we have these outages in Texas. That's why people were freezing their ass off in Texas a few years ago because in the U.S. all these power grids have been privatized, and this private company they don't want to add more capacity because that's capital investment. They'd rather squeeze out the maximum profit but based on the existing infrastructure. So they don't want to add more unless they have to. They don't want to add spare capacity. So they don't have spare capacity. You can't even plug an aluminum plant right now in United States because where's the power is going to come from, right? And so this is so China have been very strategic in how they apply their restriction to United States in response to the U.S. sanction. Again, this just also goes to show you, you need a whole ecosystem for manufacturing. Like the reason why China built a whole ecosystem for manufacturing, it's not like they have to build cars, for example. You need the different factories that build the car parts. In China, they make everything, so you can source everything locally. And you have all these roads and railroads and ports that's already in place that reduce the cost. They have the economy of scale. You can't easily reproduce that. I mean, they try to do that with India, but India is not there in the level of infrastructure development as China. It will take India decades to catch up with China in that aspect. So right now, that's why Apple and others have come to realize. Foxconn actually just pull out of India. They try to make cell phone in India. Their goal was actually pretty modest. Their goal was to make shift about 25% of the production to India over the next 20 years. But right now, Foxconn just pulled out because they found they're not going to make any profit if they stay in India, because it's not just about the labor cost. Labor cost is one part of it. But now in the modern manufacturing, there's so much more going into making into a product. The labor cost is not actually as significant as it before. Like people visit modern Chinese factory today, they're very highly automated. There's a lot of robots. They don't need like millions of young women working on the assembly line to put together a toy anymore. They have robots, and so again, I think this is probably beyond U.S. congressmen to comprehend. I mean, like they are making these policies based on what they read in New York Times, Washington Post, and then these newspapers, this corporate media are just reporting what their audience like to hear, which is China is collapsing, right? Anytime now, any day, and so we. Yeah. Anyway, I'm done ranting. Back to you, Rashid.
I want to play this little clip, but I want to stay on this part about China and India for a second because I want to get to something very, very important that never ever gets addressed, and I want to address it on this show. So let me play this, and I want you to just listen to this little 40-second clip here.
China would be even a bigger nightmare for the West, because look at China's standing as a socialist country, as a country that offers so much aid to other countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America. It's an entirely different ballgame. And, if the United States tries to use Taiwan as a pawn against China, their defeat on that issue, I'm not talking militarily at this time, but politically, will be much more resounding than their impending defeat of the using Ukraine as a pawn against Russia.
They're saying that in so many words. He's saying if you think the U.S. is losing against Russia and Ukraine, if they try to pull this with China and Taiwan, it's a whole different ball game. But I want to ask you something about India, because a lot of people, they don't like to ask these questions, but I have to. Now, there's a border issue between China and India. Why is it that India is so suspicious of China when China is trying to have direct investment and infrastructure build up in India and help it modernize? And yet they are not that suspicious with their colonial masters, and they allow Britain to do X, Y, and Z, and they have a short memory. All they do is bring up, well, you colonized us, but they're willing to bend over backwards for the United States, the UK, and the Western colonial nations, and yet a person because India can't pick up its borders and go over to the West. But a nation that's right next to it that is trying to invest and trying to put in a win-win situation, India continues to provoke, to stoke, and even with these little bans on Chinese companies and Chinese investment and stuff. Why is that? Is there a mentality of the Chinese kicked our butts in 1962 that they just can't get over?
Yes. So India has a very westernized elite. I think I highly recommend people to look up what Malcolm X have said about India versus China. But India from the very beginning, during the British India rule, the Britain they only had Britain is a small country to rule all over India. They have their own colonial bureaucrats who sit on the top, but they really rely on this bureaucracy of the Indian elites to run their empires for them. So when India became independent in 1947, the top layer got removed, the British got removed, but all these Indian elite who were running the British bureaucracy, India just inherited this the whole colonial legacy, but they're still very much oriented to the West. If you look at the top Indian leaders, Nehru, for example, he was educated in the West. All of them speak English. They're very plugged into what's happening in the West. This goes beyond India. This goes to a lot of the colonial elite all across the world. They have been sometimes they might be more in tune with Hollywood or Western pop culture than what's going on in their own country, and this is why they India and China had the border issues starting from very beginning, starting from 1950s, because they essentially inherited the colonial border of the British India, which the British tried to impose on then China. British unilaterally draw those lines on a map and declare this is our territory, and a lot. China had confronted similar issues, for example, when in their border negotiation with Myanmar, because Myanmar was also part of the British India. They also inherited this colonial borders, but China and Myanmar were able to settle this dispute peacefully. China largely agreed to leave the colonial border as they are, and then they finalized that border and left it at that. Whereas India, what happened? There was two sections of the border. They have the eastern section, which is bordering near the Myanmar boundary dispute. They have a western section, which is near Ladakh. And what happened is in the 1950s, the Chinese premier Zhou Enlai made a proposal like, let's do a land swap. We control this bits that you dispute. You control this bits we dispute. Let's just freeze the border as is and make it a final international border. So we'll give you the eastern sector. You give us a western sector, but the Indian leadership did not agree because they saw that China already made concession to Myanmar in their border, so they knew what China's bottom line was. They knew that China was about to. They expected China to give up.
Oh, please don't cut him off at this moment. Oh, Carl. Hopefully he can get back in. Oh my God, Carl this is what I need to hear. Everybody, Carl has been frozen. He was frozen before, and he went out of the booth and he came back. Oh, there you are.
I don't know.
You stopped at
Okay.
India was when you got frozen. You were at India expected China. They saw what happened with Myanmar. Go ahead.
Yes. So India kind of know what the Chinese bottom line was. They were expecting China to give in concessions in the eastern sector. So they're like, no, we like to have the western sector too. Like they refuse to do the kind of give and take negotiation, and that in 1950, but the relationship really broke down in 1959 after the Tibetan revolt in Lhasa, and the Dalai Lama escaped to India. So China blamed India for sponsoring Dalai Lama's revolt in Tibet. And that really led to kind of the flaring up of the border tensions. And that eventually led to the 1962 border war. And I think you are correct that the 1962 war, which China defeated India, I think that cast a long psychological shadow among the Indian ruling elite, because they feel like they need to do something about this. That's why, like, India always try to compare itself with China. Like, it's interesting because in the Chinese media, China tend to compare itself with the United States, and by India try to compare itself with China because in the 1980s when I was born in China, at that time the GDP per capita between India and China about the same. And it's about the same throughout the 1980s. But as China started its opening and reform, by 1990s, the Chinese economy just took off. And now, when China and India economy about the same in the 1980s, right now, India is only about a third it's much smaller economy than China is. And this made a lot of the Indian elite uncomfortable, because it really reflect a failure on their own failure of governance, right? They failed to develop India as quickly, as fast as China have done. And this is, but on the other hand, India elite is also not united. India is more like the West in the way how their society is structured. They have the oligarchs who control all the resources. You have so they like the Ambani's clan, who sponsor Modi in the government. They have a monopoly in the Indian. They're trying to monopolize the Indian tech sector, but they're facing competition when the Chinese seed money is coming in to fund all these Indian tech startups. So what they did is, using this leverage in this Indian-China border tension, they got Modi to ban Chinese investment into the Indian startups. Then the Ambani themselves, they came up with the Geo, which is actually in partnership with Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook. And so the oligarchical elite of India are in cahoots with the American tech bros and the American billionaires. They work together to monopolize the Indian market. So they have an incentive to keep the Chinese investment fund coming in to fund all those Indian tech startups. So there's that at play too. If you look at the class analysis, it start to make a lot more sense. The Indian oligarchical capital, they are more aligned with the Western capital to keep out the competition and to keep the market for themselves. And in a way, they what Ambani clan they have developed is they just take Facebook, the technology from Facebook, they slap their brand on it, and then they have a monopoly over all of Indian population, because the government helped them out to keep the rest of the population. So they keep on. It's like a rent-seeking enterprise. They're collecting rent on the Indian economy, basically. So there's a very powerful force to kind of prevent this cooperation from China and the foreign direct investment, because all these Indian oligarchs have long dominated the Indian economy. They like to keep the way things are. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, but I wanted to, and we can move on a little bit more, but I wanted to go back to this border issue just 1 second, because when that war popped off, the Chinese had given warning to Nehru a few times before that they were, that they were stepping over China's red lines, and because at first they were friends or whatever, and when the war broke out, the Chinese broke through the Indians' lines like this. They could have taken New Delhi if they could have went on to New Delhi and taken it if they wanted to. Why did they unilaterally, after doing what they did, pull back? Because to me, they could have taken the disputed territories if they wanted to.
So this is something I highly recommend, a book called India's China War by Neville Maxwell, who is an Australian journalist based in India. He had access to the secret Henderson report from Indian government. So after the war, after the defeat, the Indian government commissioned its military to do a thorough background investigation to see how the whole thing came about. And this is the famous Henderson report, which remained classified till this day because the Indian government don't want the public to know. But Neville Maxwell, he had the access to this report through his network. So he based a lot of his findings to write the book, India's China War. And this really, this is so first of all, Nehru was the one he often gets a blame. And in the 1950s, there was a period when China and India were in the honeymoon phase. It's called the Hindi Chini Bye Bye period. Literally China India brothers, and this is also kicked off in the we talk about Spirit of Bandung in the Bandung conference in 1955, with Nehru and Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai both attended in Bandung, Indonesia, because India and China were the leaders of the non-aligned movement, but then fast forward a few years later, at the time the Indian opposition, led by the Indian Nationalist Party, which later became the BJP, which is the ruling party today, they want India to align with the West. They didn't want India to align too closely with China. So they made the border issue a big domestic issue in India. They're accusing Nehru of selling out to the Chinese. So the Nehru himself, that he has to be tough. He's like, okay, I'm tough on national security. And this is why this led to the kind of the deadlock in the border negotiation, because Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai made a very sensible proposal. Let's just freeze the conflict. Let's just see, the area you control is become yours, and where area we control become ours, and make an international border. Then there will be no more border dispute. But Nehru rebuffed that offer, and this has led to 1959, when the Indian opposition demand the Indian military to enforce their border, which previously only existed on paper, when British drew a line across the map. So this is, and the British drew two lines, one line in the western section of Ladakh, and another line in the eastern sector called McMahon Line. In the western sector, because that's a sector that India never controlled, in the 1950s, China built a road connecting Xinjiang and Tibet through that territory. And then Indian newspaper got a wind of that. So like, oh my God, China is building a road on the Indian territory. We have to do something about that. And so Nehru, pushed by his own opposition, decided to send troops to enforce the Indian claim. And they advanced on both fronts. And now, on the eastern sector, the McMahon Line, China said that was an illegal line drawn by British. They didn't recognize it, but Chinese troops never crossed that line. Then in 1960s, when the Indian army arrived at the McMahon Line, they look at the whole reason that the British drew the line is because they find out there was a piece of Tibet that extended south of Himalayas, and they thought, oh, that's unacceptable. Like the Tibetan, by extension, the Chinese government, they would have control of the high ground, and then they'll place us at a disadvantage. The border should run at the crest of the mountain of the Himalayas. So they wanted to push all the Tibetan administration from the south of Himalayas across to the north, and so that's why they drew the line. And in fact, the British themselves forgot about it in the because in 1914 the First World War broke out, so they kind of forgot about it. By 1930s, when the Japanese were advancing, they're like, okay, we need to look at the map again, and they pull out the map from the archive. Oh wait, we had a claim line that's run right on the top of the Himalayas. So they send in the troops in 1940 to enforce their claim. And then in 1950, the Indian government followed their policy to throw out the Tibetan officials from the Lhasa government that was stationed in Taiwan, etc. So when the Chinese army came to Tibet in 1950s, they were approached by the representative from Dalai Lama's government, saying, we have a dispute with the Indian government. and this is how the dispute became known. But the Chinese largely respected the McMahon Line drawn by British because they never crossed it. And when the Indian military arrived, they look at the line on the map and they look at the mountain. They're like, oh, there was one section of the McMahon Line that were not drawn to the spirit of McMahon line, because they said that the mountaintop is over there, but the line is drawn over here. So we need to follow the spirit of McMahon line and push the border actually across north of the McMahon line to the top of the mountain over there. And so at that point, when they find they even cross the illegal border drawn by the British. At that point, that's when the Chinese army responded in 1962. The Mao said, they've been fucking with us for 3 years. You know, this is unacceptable. And then he ordered the Chinese army to counterattack. They pushed the Indian army across the McMahon line, and they briefly took over the disputed territory in the eastern sector. But then China made a announcement to withdraw. I mean, I think it's based on a couple reasons. I mean, one is they didn't want to antagonize. They want to still leave room for negotiation with India on the border issue. They didn't want to permanently antagonize the relationship by just simply occupy the disputed area. And two, I think, this is my guess, is because the oncoming winters, because the mountain passes over the Himalayas will freeze for 6 months. Then the Chinese army south of the Himalayas will be trapped without supplies for 6 months. And so for tactical reason also, they withdrew. But also they show goodwill. They say, we didn't come here to take away the disputed land by force. They're still hoping to leave room for negotiation. So this is another thing I have to point out is when the People's Republic of China was founded in 1949, inherited border dispute across all of its borders because of the past issues of the colonial encroachment, you know, from Tsarist Russia in the north, the British and the French in the south. But China managed to resolve all its land border dispute with every single country, with the exception of India and Bhutan. And Bhutan is because India handles Bhutan's foreign policy. So really, India is the one that the only one that's holding out because it does not want to negotiate the border. And this is why the border issue festered till today. And add to that, I think it's because of they can witness that China somehow pull ahead of India in development in the last 40 years. This created some kind of unsettled feeling on the part of the Indian elite. And this is why there's also there's like the India's westernized elite that they're more comfortable to look to the West, even though what right now India has been serving for the past 30 years is to basically to provide human capital for the Western economic development. If you look at what India's the most promising sector in India is their vaunted service economy. You know, the call centers and software, etc. They are to provide the support for the service economy of the West. The difference is in China, the Chinese manufacturing is actually serving the needs of not only export to the outside world, but to also the Chinese people. Because as we talked about before, like in the 1980s, all the manufactured goods in China have to be imported. But what China did is import substitution. Now China can make refrigerators and TVs, so the Chinese people don't have to import that anymore. But the same thing is not happening in India. They are still kind of function as kind of almost like their service economy is wholly oriented towards servicing the Western economy. I think this is kind of the major difference, and this is why I explain the Western orientation of the Indian elite, because you know, culturally they're more in tune with the West, and because, you know, their economy, their financial elite is also more in cahoots with the West.
Now
Hopefully that explains something.
Oh,
Go
hey,
ahead.
man, you hitting everything on the head. I'm gonna ask you this question myself, and then from that point on, after you answer my question, we'll go to the chat. If you guys have any questions, please put them up. We won't hold them much longer. But if you have any comments, I see Mehdi is already up, so I'm going to highlight him in just a second. And then, but I want to say this: China has a policy of non-interference, but I think that should be limited with Pakistan. We see what the United States is doing with Imran Khan because he wants to push Pakistan more into the global south and cement Pakistan's standing with China. Why isn't the Chinese government um, putting more pressure on the Pakistani military and all of those areas because this is a national security threat to China because what the United States wants is more CIA bases there, more military bases there, not to just go and fly drones into Afghanistan, but this is the underbelly of the Chinese and the Russians. So why isn't it Russia and China exerting more political, economic pressure on the Pakistani establishment to right this wrong and push the U.S. and Britain out of their former colony? And then before you answer that, I'm gonna put up my template for a second because I got to fix the lighting and the microphone. But I'm still here, so you can go ahead.
Okay. So Pakistan, people have to realize Pakistan actually has been a long-standing Western ally from the very beginning, since independence, since the Indian partition and the independence of India and Pakistan. In fact, before the 1962 war between India and China, India had a friendly relationship with China had a friendly relationship with India, but Pakistan was antagonistic toward China because Pakistan was in the Western camp, and its elite was very, very anti-communist. But then 1960 war basically resulted in 180-degree turn in the Pakistan elite. They suddenly switched to align with China because they saw they can leverage China against a common enemy, India. And since 1962, China-Pakistan relationship have been steadily improving. It got to the point where now it says it's called the Iron Brotherhood. But one of the thing with Pakistan is its military is always in control. It's the Pakistan military establishment remain in control almost since the beginning, and in Pakistan, unfortunately, military is the most functional part of the government, and so they have a lot of leverage in all sectors in Pakistan. But I think the thing with Imran Khan, we all seen with U.S. ambassador the leaked tape from the U.S. ambassador to Pakistan. The U.S. definitely want Imran Khan out. That's a given. Because Imran Khan was saying stuff about getting close to Russia, about piloting an independent policy for Pakistan. Now, Pakistan it's interesting because it was always at the forefront of the Cold War. All right, during the Cold War, Pakistan was at the front line. In fact, United States, Saudi Arabia, but mostly CIA, pull out the Operation Cyclone, one of the largest CIA operation before the CIA operation in Syrian war. That was to finance the Mujahideens in Afghanistan to fight the Soviets, and but the rift happened after the end of the Cold War because because for U.S. is all its allies are expendable. The Pakistan's use became not as important when the Soviet Union collapsed. And this is when U.S. slapped sanction on Pakistan for its nuclear testing, for building its missiles, with help of China, and that pushed Pakistan closer and closer to the Chinese orbit. But Pakistan still have to rely large part on IMF loans, and this is one big leverage that the West have on Pakistan. Before Pakistan was very close to the West, it was buying F-16s from the United States. One of the sanctions U.S. levy on Pakistan was actually withholding delivery of F-16s after the Pakistan have paid for them, right? And so Pakistan military wasn't happy about that. That pushed them further together with China. So Chinese non-intervention policy says, we don't interfere into the domestic politics, which it does on the surface. It looks like it leaves a free room for CIA, for the United States to do whatever they want. But the interventionist policy also is not get China itself entangled in the domestic politics of other nations, like in this case, Pakistan. So Pakistan, there's two factions. There's the Imran Khan's faction, and there's the Pakistani military. They were at the loggerheads, and the Pakistani military had to go ahead with the United States, with their blessing, remove Imran Khan. But if you look at Pakistan's foreign policy after the removal of Imran Khan, they did not immediately jump into the arms of NATO. All the policies that piloted by Imran Khan about doing business with Russia still continue. Pakistan still continue to buy food and oil from Russia, and Pakistan still continue its cooperation with China. So I think the U.S. Influence is limited. They may be able to do things as give their go ahead to the Pakistan military to remove Imran Khan, but so far I don't see a fundamental shift in the Pakistan establishment's foreign policy. I think the Pakistan's foreign policy orientation, that's a secular shift toward the east rather than towards the west, because the west has been pushing them away for so long. If anything, Chinese are very patient. They're very patient. They're willing to wait and see and let things play out. And so I think that's what the attitudes are adopting toward Pakistan right now. It's the wait and see, and in the meantime, they are strengthening their own economic investment in the country. The China-Pakistan economic corridor is one of the flagship project of the Belt and Road Initiative. So China is still building power plants, roads in Pakistan, all the infrastructure Pakistan needs. This is how China ties China and Pakistan together, not some political mechanism at the top, because I think the momentum, that the Pakistan's east shift momentum is already set. So this is my 2 cents on this
okay
topic.
Putin's shirt and Mehdi, channel members, Mehdi wanted me to ask you the question that Putin's shirt says. It says, Modi just had a summit with Sleepy Joe. I think Modi gave the U.S. permission to use Indian military bases. Do either of you know anything about this? Before you answer that, didn't India sign a basing agreement with the United States a few years ago and then doubled down on it recently?
So India right now, they're in the position of where China was in the 1980s. So if people remember Nixon visit to China, the main rationale is to play the China card against the Soviet Union. So United States think they can do the same thing by playing India against China. Now, with a caveat is that the Indian elite, as much as beholden there to the West, they're also very proud people. Because India, they came from an ancient civilization. They see themselves as a great power. They don't want to be seen as pawns of anyone. They don't want to be a vassal state to the United States. So India will always carry out foreign policy that it sees best fit for India's national interest. So which means at this point, India is still a member nation of the BRICS, but it's also a member of the Quad. So they are trying to get the both deal from the both sides. I mean, which is, I totally understandable. I totally respect the hustle. And so they are getting military technology and weapon platform from United States. And at the same time, they're trying to reap the economic benefit by being involved as part of the BRICS nations. Which I understand the hustle, man. I understand. You try to get the vote, but I don't. So I don't think India will necessarily tilt too far to one side or the other. They will try to get the best deal for themselves. So yes, there will be. They may allow U.S. military to make port calls to India, for example, allow U.S. Navy to play to do port, because right now United States is very much like to control the Indian Ocean, because the Indian Ocean links Middle East, Africa with China, right? So U.S. is very concerned about growth of Chinese Navy. So this is why United States felt has to partner up with India, because India's strategic location sitting right in the center of the Indian Ocean. So U.S. is hoping to gain basing agreement with India, so U.S. Navy can project power. I think that India may allow that to a limited extent, but not to the extent that India will become, say, the next Japan or South Korea, or because they will. For those countries, if USA jump, they have to say how high, and India can make the calculations like, what, we're still going to buy Russian oil because why not? It's a good deal for us. So I think that's what's going on. India is playing a balancing game.
Now, there's another question in there, but I want to preface this question with another one of my questions. Why is America so in an uproar over a supposed Chinese base, I believe in Cambodia, but I think it's in Cambodia, but the base that they're all up in arms about was a base that the United States used to occupy, and also Mehdi says is most of the current Indian oligarchy from the old money.
Yeah, I mean, people have to have a historical perspective. My dog is going crazy because there's a farmer walking out and he doesn't like it. He thinks he owns all this territory.
My chickens do that in the morning time when I'm doing shows. The chickens are like going crazy.
My dog is acting like the United States right now. You think he owns the world, and so right now. Putting up historical perspective, during the Vietnam War, the South China Sea was basically American lake. U.S. had air base and naval base in the Philippines. They had naval air base in South Vietnam. They had base in Thailand. They had what's called a Yankee Station, which is this flotilla of U.S. aircraft carrier and the U.S. fleet that was permanently floating around South China Sea. At that time, China couldn't do anything about it. China barely had a blue navy, didn't have a blue water navy back then. But today, one of the reasons why U.S. is so upset about China in South China Sea is that it's no longer American lake. In fact, America, U.S. Navy have to do their so-called freedom of navigation just to show their presence. Like, yeah, we can still be here. Whereas, like back in just before I was born, they used to like run around that place like they own the whole sea. So it's against this economic this historical development. They're upset that China is having a friendly tie with Cambodia, which China has always done, because during the Vietnam War, when United States supported the Cambodian military dictatorship under Lord Nong, the Cambodian king, the Prince Sihanouk, took refuge in China. He stayed in Beijing, and through that friendship, China post Vietnam War, after 1990, after the UN brokered a peace deal in Cambodia, China were able to come back and continue to maintain a friendship with Cambodia. Cambodia is one of China's closest ally in Southeast Asia. And China is building up the Cambodian infrastructure, building the port. So the reports about Chinese military base in Cambodia right now only exists in the Western media. So I'm going to take a pinch of salt with that, because right now the only confirmed overseas Chinese military base is a supply base for Chinese Navy in Djibouti. Because the Chinese Navy participated in the international patrol around the Red Sea area, and so they needed supply base, and Djibouti was strategically located at the Horn of Africa. But Cambodia, China, what we know is China is building a port for Cambodia, and what U.S. media is saying, that port can also be used to host the Chinese Navy. Maybe we don't know. And what they really don't like is the fact that U.S. influence is gradually being pushed out of South China Sea since the 1970s, since the end of the Vietnam War. Right now, United States is actually trying to come back. They got kicked out of the Philippines in the 1990s. The Philippine government said, no, we're not going to extend your air base at the Clark Air Base. We're not going to extend your naval base. So right now they're trying to come back to the Philippines by playing up the China threat. So we're going to see how far they get away with that. But they're upset because they don't call the shots anymore.
Real Truth Talk wants to know, what do you think of XRP? Which is
XRP?
a crypto.
Oh, crypto! I have no opinions on crypto. I'm not an investor in crypto, so I have no. I stay within what Warren Buffett calls the circle of competence. That the crypto is outside of my circle of competence. So if you ask me about China, I can talk to you all about China, but I have no opinion on crypto.
Ace Hampton says, great rapport between the two of you. Red Pill and Carl are quickly becoming a new favorite. Well, thank you. We both say thank you on that.
Thank you.
Mehdi, let's see. He says, let's put this up. He says, yes, electronic surveillance systems to gather data from Chinese transmissions, radar bands. That is why we want to be in Pakistan. Well, that's why the United States want to be everywhere. They want to monitor everybody and everything to suppress any emerging power or combination of powers. And let's see. Well, let's see. Let's go down a little bit. Well, I'm looking at the time, and we've had him long enough. Carl and I are supposed to do a recording when he's free on it a while from now for you guys, and we'll play it as if it's live, because we know what they're doing to the show, and so but we will have him back live on the show if he would come back. I mean, I love talking to this guy. I can talk, Carl, I can talk to you all day about the situation that's going on over there in Asia, man, because that is I mean, everything is shifting from west to east, and it's best to be informed about these things that are going on instead of having the Western press propagandize you on these things. In closing, what do you have to say to the viewers and the people that will listen and view later?
Well, thank you, Rashid, for inviting me. You know, it's a pleasure. You invite me anytime. I love to talk, so I can go on I can talk for hours. Yeah, just talking about geopolitics, talking about China is one of my passions. So I can go on all day. It's a pleasure. I mean, it's good to know that the audience are appreciate what we do here. And I hope we continue this. We continue this into the future.
Yeah, man. I would love to do this, man. I would love to do this with you constantly. Like I said, you shed light on certain things, especially certain things that I'm not aware of over in Asia and things like that. And you give a in-depth perspective. And I think the people who are watching are learning and feeding off that, and they're growing mentally so that they're not propagandized off of the Western press, man. Again, from my heart to your ears, man, I really appreciate everything.
Thank you, Rashid. Thank you.
I'll talk to you later, man. Be safe, be blessed, and keep your wife safe too, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right.
Goodbye, everybody.
All right. Everybody, we thank Carl for joining us again on the Red Pill Diaries. I thank each and every one of you for giving us the time, because we've been on here for over 2 hours. I told you we were going to come back and try to defeat the system and try to defeat the algorithm, and we're going to have Carl on a pre-recorded program, and then we're going to have him back on here. The pre-recorded will be released to members, channel members, and patrons members first, and then it'll be released on YouTube. Also, we're going to have him live back on the program. And I thank you all for giving me another hour of your day and another day of your time. Time is the most precious and most valued commodity. Know that I love you, but always remember that God will always love you best. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, stay righteous. Hey, mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Deuces, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on the most powerful platform for truth anywhere on God's earth. I'm out.